All right, welcome back. Episode 2 of the Q&A. First episode, we talked about weight classes. We talked about gaining weight, the effect on performance, losing weight, the effect on performance. So the next question that I had was from Anthony, Aqua D Man. I know it's a Quad Man on Instagram, but I always go with Aqua D Man because it's just way funnier. So his question was something along the lines of, sorry, Anthony, I'm forgetting your exact question, but it was something along the lines of what variables do you manipulate in a fat loss diet? How frequently do you manipulate them? Why do you manipulate them? Basically, just walk me through how I set up a fat loss diet for a client. So a fat loss diet is essentially maximizing your outputs and manipulating the inputs. So what's an input and what's an output when it comes to dieting? We're gonna take a look at that. So we'll start off with the basics, and then we'll kind of get into some applied from there. So the first part of the basics is the TDEE. This is what people call, or this is what people are talking about when they say calories out. So you'll hear it all the time. Calories in, calories out. That's what it comes down to. Bit oversimplistic, but at the end of the day, that is what dictates it. So what are they talking about when they talk about the calories out side of the equation? What they're talking about is your total daily energy expenditure, your TDEE. How many calories are you expending over a 24-hour period? If I know that number, then I can control the amount of calories in, and I can dictate whether my weight stays the same, like in the weight maintenance example there, where the scale is balanced, whether I'm losing weight, I'm in what's called a caloric deficit, and you can see the scale there is balanced in favor of calories out, or the weight gain, the calorie surplus, where the scale is favoring or weighted down by the calories inside of things. So the calories outside of things is broken down into 4 distinct numbers. BMR, your basal metabolic rate, it's the amount of energy you expend just to keep your body alive. So basic functions of the human body to keep you alive. It's around 60 to 70% of your total metabolic rate or your total daily energy expenditure. So somewhere between 60 to 70%, and we'll talk about what actually dictates how high that number is. The second number is the thermic effect of food. It's anywhere from 5 to 10% of your total caloric expenditure or your total daily energy expenditure for the day, and we'll talk about how to manipulate that as well. You've got your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which makes up anywhere from 10 all the way up to 25%. So this is how much you move around during the day, your step count, what kind of job are you working. So if you're working a manual labor job, you may be on the higher end, sedentary job on the lower end. We'll talk about that. And last but not least is your EAT, your exercise activity thermogenesis. This is around 10 to 20% of your total daily energy expenditure. You can ramp it up by doing significantly more structured exercise. So things like cardiovascular training, resistance training, those would fall under the exercise activity thermogenesis. And the eternal question remains, do I have a slow metabolism? And it's a complex question. It seems like a simple question at face value, but it's a complex question because you could have a slow metabolism, but it's because one of those 4 factors. There's no other factor outside of those 4 that's going to give you a necessarily slow metabolism. So who might actually have a slow metabolism? People who are small, so small women, people who are low in muscle mass. So if you have very low muscle mass, if you don't move around very much throughout the day, so let's say you're a bank teller and you sit behind a desk all day, you may actually have a slower metabolism. But if you correct what you're intaking, you'll see that you'll still have plenty of success. So moving right along, some explanations here on basal metabolic rate. This is largely dictated by body size and muscle mass. So if you want to have a high basal metabolic rate, you need to be large in size, which is kind of counterintuitive to a fat loss diet. But the more you weigh, the greater the surface area of the body, the higher your basal metabolic rate will be. You can also shift that basal metabolic rate around by gaining muscle mass instead of gaining body fat. So muscle mass is significantly more metabolic than body fat. So if you're adding muscle mass, you're going to be creating a much higher metabolism for yourself. Or I really shouldn't say much higher. I believe the number was 5 to 6 calories per day per pound of muscle. It's not the 40, 50 per hour, whatever they say at the local LA Fitness. Some other explanations here. Thermic effect of food. So the thermic effect of food is how many calories do you burn digesting, absorbing, utilizing your food. It's highest for protein. You burn around 25% of that energy from protein. Depends on the protein source. We can get into plant versus animal, but 25 is a rough number that's right in the middle of those, which means that 1 gram of protein has 4 calories. You expend one of those calories, or 25%, just digesting, absorbing, utilizing that protein. So if you consume a meal and it has 100 calories worth of protein, you would burn 25 of those. So the meat sweats, they're a real thing. The thermic effect for carbohydrate is anywhere from 5 to 10%. Again, it's going to be dictated by the food source. So your fibrous carbohydrates will have a higher thermic effect. Your more sugary carbohydrates, or your simpler carbohydrates, will have a lower thermic effect. And then you get about 2 to 3% for fats. So very, very low thermic effect for fats. Your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, this is just going to be how much you move throughout the day. So what's your step count? Are you a fidgeter? What kind of job do you work? Are you always on your feet? Are you moving around throughout the day, or are you doing the complete opposite? Because we can see a 1,000 calorie difference in total daily energy expenditure, even more between someone who's not very active at all and someone who's extremely active throughout the day. So people kind of get confused between NEAT and EAT, or exercise activity thermogenesis. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis is any activity you do outside of structured exercise. So that would be picking up your kids, playing with the kids, going out for a walk with the dogs, doing laundry, chopping up food for your next meal, whatever it may be, as long as it's not structured exercise. As soon as it becomes 30 minutes of Stairmaster, all of a sudden that's exercise because there's structure to it. As soon as it becomes 3 sets of 8 on squat, there's your structure, then it becomes exercise. And that's our next one down there, is exercise activity thermogenesis. And that is broken down into 2. So we've got resistance training. The spoiler alert on resistance training is it really doesn't do shit in terms of burning a lot of calories. It's a very, very small amount. Cardiovascular training, however, can actually increase your calorie expenditure by a good amount. The more intense the cardiovascular training, the higher the calorie expenditure. So when you go to that Orange Theory fitness class and you're on the gym floor or you're on the weight room floor and you're doing curls and the heart rate monitor says you're at 160 and it says you're burning 1,000 calories in an hour, that's poor data. That's not actually how many calories you are burning. If you think about resistance training, a traditional resistance training, not a circuit training, I'd argue that's more cardiovascular. But traditional resistance training is 30 seconds. I do some curls, and then what do? I sit for 60 to 90 seconds. So most of your resistance training session is actually sitting and resting for your next set, whereas cardiovascular training is 30 minutes straight through, continuous, no breaks. And then I gave you a little chart over here on the right to look at, a little pie graph. Who doesn't love some pie? Where you can see BMR, obviously the largest, TEF, smallest, second smallest, no matter, depends. And then you've got your physical activity, which is broken down into exercise, which remember is structured, and non-exercise, which is not structured. All right, so if we're gonna manipulate our calories out, how do we do that? Well, we start with the biggest chunk, basal metabolic rate. And like I said before, there's not a lot we can do here in terms of metabolic rate, or in terms of basal metabolic rate. You can be larger in size, you can add muscle mass, but it's pretty hard to add muscle mass on a fat loss diet. So what you want to do to maximize your basal metabolic rate while you are dieting is to implement intelligent resistance training and cardio volumes. So make sure that you're not doing too much cardio and losing that precious muscle mass, or you're doing some stupid training program where you're doing just some pump sets and then you go home, or you're trying to do some powerlifting 10 sets of one kind of training program. You want to train in the way that's going to build muscle and then use cardio as a way to expend extra energy. So pretty easy recommendations there. Now, can I manipulate the thermic effect of food? Yes, I can. It's a small chunk, but you can manipulate this. How do I manipulate it? by going for a higher protein diet. So shooting for the higher end of those recommendations, that 1.8 to 2.2 grams per kilogram, shooting for the 2.2 or maybe even higher, personal preference on that. Higher protein diet, because protein is the most thermic macronutrient, will give you the greatest yield in terms of thermic effective food. Now, there are some fad diets that are particularly poor when it comes to thermic effective food. The first one that comes to mind is keto, a very high fat diet. 70% of your kilocalories coming from dietary fat will yield a very low thermic effective food. So one of the biggest positives of the ketogenic diet is it reduces your appetite, or people have subjectively said that it reduces their appetite, but it really does defeat thermic effective food, or really brings down your thermic effective food. How much of a difference does that make? I'm not sure it really matters that much. And if we look at the research where we see higher carbohydrate diet versus the ketogenic diet, no real differences between the two groups when you equate for protein and calories, you can kind of see maybe thermic effective food isn't that big of a deal, but we can still maximize it with a higher protein diet. Other diets like paleo, I've heard some things about paleo, low carbohydrate, so you may get a lower thermic effective food, probably really doesn't matter that much. And then with intermittent fasting, because you're eating roughly the same amount of food, you're just condensing it into a smaller window, you'll just get a greater thermic response within that smaller window. So not a lot of difference there either. And the research fleshes this out when we look at these diets and we compare them. If we control for calories and protein, they're all about the same. So not a lot you can do there, but do yourself a favor. High protein diet or a higher protein diet than the average American will definitely cover your bases. Now, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, what can we do there? What you want to do is you want to establish a baseline of activity. The easiest way to do this is to set a step count. You say, all right, John, your step count, your minimum step count used to be 5,000. We're going to set you at 8,000. You're just going to shoot for that. Stick with it. What people will subconsciously do over the course of a diet is actually move around less. Start eating less food, start doing more cardiovascular training. The resistance training is getting significantly harder. So what do the rest of the day? They lounge. They just sit around all day, and their step count goes down. So their weight loss plateaus, but it's because their physical activity has reduced. So set that step count, stick to it. Exercise activity thermogenesis, what can we do there? Resistance training is huge. It says C above because resistance training factors in with basal metabolic rate. When you cut out that resistance training on a fat loss diet, what actually happens is you start to lose body weight, but most of that body weight, or too large of a portion of that body weight, is coming from a loss of muscle mass, which will actually cut into your basal metabolic rate and slowly plateau you, or cause an early plateau in your diet. Cardio programming, in terms of a fat loss, or in the scope of a fat loss diet, cardio programming should be used as a way to expend excess energy. That is the main purpose of it. You just want to expend extra energy. You need to create the calorie deficit. Cardiovascular training or cardio programming offers a way for you to actually expend some extra energy, so use it as needed. Manipulations of food intake and physical activity staying the same should be enough to get fat loss done. If it's not, then you add in the cardio programming. So the graphic on the left is something that I found really, really cool. In 2008, the USDA, they compiled a look at the average American's diet. And they said, all right, the average calorie intake for an American is 2,673. Doesn't seem like that much. It's a good amount if you're sedentary. But where are those calories actually coming from? You can see that the largest portions of those are coming from grains and added fats. So this is things like butter and toast. So adding extra fat, oils and grains. And then you see a good portion of that is coming from meat, egg, and nuts. So probably higher fat meats, not the leaner cuts like we're told to emphasize. Added sugars, another huge one. So the latest statistics that I've seen is that 20 to 30% of the average American's calories are coming from sugar-sweetened beverages. That blows my mind. That means that 20 to 30% of their calories are coming from things like soda, Gatorade, energy drinks, things like that. And you see, what are the two smallest ones on here is that we see the veg and the fruit. So people are eating only around 208 calories of that 2673 from veg and fruit. What you would find is if you switched the veg and fruit with the grains and added fat, that calorie intake would go down. People would be satiated. They would feel better. We would see an improvement in health. But good luck trying to get people to actually do that. But what are we actually talking about on this slide? We're talking about the food and drink. This is the energy inside. So we handled the energy out. Let's talk about the energy in. So where does my energy in come from? It comes from food, and it comes from liquid calories or beverage. So my food intake is really broken down into how many calories am I consuming, and then the split of the macronutrients: proteins, carbs, fat, and then fiber, which would be a subset of carbohydrates. Now, liquid calories, like I just said, 20 to 30% of the average American diet are these, what I would call diet unfriendly drinks. Things like Gatorade, Powerade, soda, lemonade, sweet tea. The problem with sugar sweetened beverages is they don't do anything for your appetite. The biggest issue here is the thirst mechanism and the hunger mechanism are two opposing mechanisms in the brain. When I drink liquid calories, it doesn't actually satiate my hunger. And when you get that blood sugar response of a big spike and then a big drop, you actually feel hungrier. So try and stay away from those diet unfriendly drinks. Now, what are diet friendly drinks? A lot of people will talk, oh, that diet soda, that's terrible for you. It's as bad for you as regular soda. That's one of the things that irks me more than anything when people say that. Consume your diet drinks, but consume them in moderation. Remember, we haven't seen anything on aspartame, on sucralose, on these sugar-sweetened beverages yet, but an absence of evidence isn't evidence of an absence. So there could still be something there. My recommendation that I give to all my clients, and the one that I practice myself, is to just consume it in moderation. Now, there are some sneaky calories when it comes to liquids. So a lot of people don't know that there are some calories in your favorite energy drinks, in your favorite diet sodas, and in my biggest weakness is Crystal Light. So in Crystal Light, I'll just use Crystal Light as an example here. In Crystal Light, you get the package, makes 2 quarts. So you get half gallon of Crystal Light. If you look at the back, it says it has 5 calories per serving. You're like, sweet, 5 calories per serving. What you don't see is that there's 8 servings in one of those 2-quart packets. So if you're having 2 of those a day, that's 80 calories. Over the course of a week, that's 560 calories. That's still a good amount of calories. That equates to somewhere around about 1/5 of a pound of weight loss. So be wary of the sneaky stuff. Make sure it's truly calorie free. Or, there's another thing. Drink water. Water is, I know we all hate water. It tastes like crap, blah, blah, blah. But most of your fluid intake should probably come from water, and then have your low calorie or no calorie beverages as well. Stay away from the diet unfriendly stuff. Now, threw a little GIF, little meme in here as well on how to set your calories, because you are going to be doing some math. So what I recommend is, if you haven't been listening, listen right now. Just hit pause on this slide and you'll be able to kind of set your own calories going forward. This teaches you all the math for it. So first you want to determine your basal metabolic rate. When you're finding out how many calories do I need in a day to maintain, lose, gain weight, whatever it is, start by determining your basal metabolic rate. Find your body weight in kilograms, pounds divided by 2.2 for my Americans. For all those commie bastards, you already know what kilograms are. Multiply that by 24. That's roughly, and I say roughly because this is a very rough estimate, because that's the best we've got. Instead of putting, short of hooking you up to the metabolic cart or putting you in a metabolic room, this is one of the best formulas that we've got here. That's roughly your BMR. You want to multiply that final number by 0.9 if you are a woman. For your advanced formulas, those are going to be the ones that are used on the Gifted Performance website. So what I had to do when I designed those formulas is I had to dig through a lot of research using the metabolic cart, using the metabolic room, and incorporating body composition as well to kind of figure out those formulas. So those are the ones that I use. But for you, if you're not looking to do advanced math, this is perfectly fine. And then you can trial and error it from here. After you've got your BMR, you want to correct for activity. And that'll give you your total daily energy expenditure. Easiest method to track your activity is probably just to do your step count. So if you are between 0 and 5,000 steps on average, just take the BMR number, no multiplier. 5,000 to 7,500, your light activity, you want to multiply by 1.2. 7,500 to 10,000. Moderate activity, multiply by 1.4. 10,000 to 15,000 or even more. And I have some clients like 15,000 steps. Who gets that many? I have clients that average 20,000 plus steps a day. Guess who doesn't have any problem losing weight? It's them. But those are your high activity folks. Multiply by 1.6. So we've got a sample client. We're going to call him Bill. He's a 175-pound male. He averages 12,000 steps a day. Good for you, Bill. Take his BMR, 79.5 kilos is what he weighs, times 24. Gives him a 1908 BMR. Total daily energy expenditure. We look up at the multipliers. He counts as high activity, so we multiply by 1.6, and we get 3,052.8 or 3,053 calories, which means that if Bill ate roughly on average right around that 3,050 calories a day, he should maintain weight. If he gains weight or he loses weight, we made some errors in the estimation. So see how much the weight changed and adjust accordingly. All right, now going from calories to macros, because calories only tell us part of the story. We have to find out his protein, his fats, and his carbohydrates. I like to go in that order, and you'll see exactly why. So for protein, majority of the literature, the ISSN position statement, or position stand, is that 1.8 to 2.2 grams per kilogram is sufficient for the resistance training individual. If you're sedentary, different recommendations, but if you're sedentary, you're probably not watching this. Lower than 1.8, not great. Higher than 2.2, you do you. So why do I say that? Lower than 1.8, you're going to run into issues where when the calorie deficit becomes severe, you may risk losing some muscle mass. So stay above 1.8. Higher than 2.2, you do you. That's personal preference. You get people who like to eat a lot of protein. You get people that just don't really like eating that much of it. So if you want to go above it, you probably won't get any extra benefit, but your kidneys aren't going to fail and you're not going to die. Very unlikely that's going to happen. Now, moving on to fats. These ISSN's position statement says 20 to 30% of total kcal should come from fat. 15% would be your lower limit. 20% for your highly active, high volume training. These are for your very high volume training individuals. So your bodybuilder who's doing an hour of resistance training and 20 to 30 minutes of walking on the treadmill after, you don't fall into this category. If you are a bodybuilder who is also doing jujitsu and also training for a cycling race, then you fit into this category. So know your category. The carbohydrates will fill in the remaining calories. Want to set fiber minimums. So fiber minimums are extremely important. The reason I set fiber minimums is because it sets constraints on the individual in terms of what food choices they can make. So they can't just eat Oreos to fill their carbohydrates or Pop-Tarts to fill their carbohydrates, because then they won't be able to hit their fiber minimum. So I put the fiber minimum in there to make sure that they're still eating the fruits, the veg, the whole grain, the stuff that should make up the majority of your carbohydrates in a health promoting diet. So two ways that you can really go about this. You can do a 10 to 14 grams per 1,000 calories, 2,000 calories. Average calories, according to the USDA, would mean 20 to 28 grams of fiber. Or you can go with the male-female, 25 to 38 grams for men, 20 to 28 grams for women. Can you go above this number? Yes. Can you go double, triple, quadruple this number? Yes, but I wouldn't recommend it. Take it from someone who has eaten 100 grams of fiber in a single day. Don't do it. Just don't. Avoid the booty blowout. It's not worth it. You also want to make sure that you are getting a healthy mix of soluble and insoluble fiber. Too much insoluble fiber, you're going to be blocked up. Too much soluble fiber, you're going to be blowing it out. So make sure you get a mixture of the two to balance those. If I mix those up, there's going to be some gut health expert that's going to destroy me. That's fine. I deserve it. All right, let's move on. Let's calculate Bill's actual macros. So Bill, 175-pound male, 12,000 daily step count average, calculated his TDEE to be 3,053 calories. So what's his protein intake? Body weight in kilos times 2.2. So let's say Bill is a bodybuilder who's looking to compete. So he's on the higher end. He wants to spare as much muscle mass as possible. Could he go above 2.2? He could, and he could probably benefit from it. I've seen some research recently that looks at 2.5, 2.8, even some stuff out of Jose Antonio's lab where they go up to 3.2 grams per kilogram or higher with no adverse effects. So personal preference up to that point, but we'll set him at 2.2 and see if he likes that or if he wants some more. So that gives him 175 grams of protein. Fat intake, we're going to go right in the middle. So 20 to 30 is what the ISSN says. Let's go with 25. So 25%, so 3,053, his total calories times 25%, 0.25, and then you divide that by 9 calories in a gram of fat, and you get 85 grams of fat. His carbohydrate intake is going to be what's left. So total kcals minus the calories from protein minus the calories from fat, divide by 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate. That gives him 397 grams of carbohydrate. Now, these macros are going to be what is going to cause him to maintain weight. So this puts him right at that 3,053, right around that 3,050 calories. So these should have him maintaining weight. If he is gaining weight, you need to adjust. If he's losing weight, you need to adjust. So remember, this isn't an exact science. There's going to be some deviation in these numbers. So just adjust accordingly. Monitor the body weight over the first couple weeks. Some weird body weight stuff happens. See what the averages are and then adjust accordingly. So there we've got Bill's macro goals at the bottom. He's going to have 175 grams of protein, 397 grams of carbohydrates, 25 to 38 grams of fiber because he's a male, and 85 grams of fat. But this is all about fat loss. So how do we actually manipulate these variables? The best way to manipulate these variables is through trial and error. I'm sure that we've all been on a fat loss, weight loss journey, and we've seen the scale do what this graph shows on the left. So we see on the left, started a fat loss diet, and oh my God, my weight went up. How the heck does that happen? Oh, wait, hold on. It's going back down. It's going down. Oh, man, it's going down really fast. I'm super excited. Oh, my God, it went back up. I'm freaking out. Oh, no, it went back down. We've all been here before. What you want to do is plot a line from the start to the finish. If your goal is fat loss and it's trending down, you're succeeding. You're successful. This individual was successful on their weight loss journey. Regardless of the blips where the weight goes up, you're still successful. So make sure you have that scale weight. Now, how often do you want to track your scale weight? Do I want to step on the scale daily? Do I want to step on the scale weekly? Do I want to step on the scale bi-weekly? That's something that you want to establish with yourself or with your clients. Some like to step on every day. Some step on it every day and they freak the F out. Oh my God, I'm up 3 pounds today. What did you eat yesterday? The same thing I always eat. So do you think you gained weight? Do you think you gained fat? Yes, I had to have gained fat. My weight went up. But you ate the same thing that made you lose 2 pounds last week. Oh yeah. So you can talk some people down off the cliff or off the edge when they're having that conversation with themselves. But for that person, maybe just have them step on weekly and take those weekly trends. You also want to use check-in photos. So check-in photos are extremely, extremely valuable. What I tell my clients all the time is that the scale weight is like your map. Tells you if you're going in the right direction. The check-in photos are like GPS. They tell you exactly where you're going because I can see exactly what's going on in front of my eyes. So a nice balance between those two. There are some others as well. You can do skin folds, so body composition assessments. You can do girth measurements. Pick what you enjoy the most. I like a combination of all of them. I like to have a lot of tools in my tool belt. Some other points on a fat loss diet. Your resistance training is extremely important. Remember when we talked about this is your best tool in preserving muscle mass and keeping your basal metabolic rate high. So you have to look at your session quality. Are you able to get in good training sessions? If not, your calories may be too low. Bump your calories up. If your training improves, stay there and see what the scale does. You also want to be able to progress your training. If you're not progressively overloading that training from week to week, month to month, if that training just physically cannot get more challenging over time or you're not getting better, you need to look at what you're actually eating and assess to see if it's enough. Up next, the next variable that you can change to push that fat loss along is your cardiovascular training. So what's your actual goal with your cardiovascular training? Is it to train the cardiovascular system where you need to elevate your heart rate to get that training adaptation? Or are we in the business of just expending energy? In a fat loss diet where the only goal is to lose fat, We are interested in energy expenditure. We're interested in burning calories. How fast you burn those calories probably doesn't matter all that much. So you need to burn 200 calories. If you want to do it in 30 minutes, fantastic. If you want to do it in 10 minutes, fantastic. You want to be careful though with the intensity of cardio because it can get so intense that it takes away from resistance training and kind of ruins your quality there. So balance that. Be able to balance that. Keep an eye on it. Make sure you're using appropriate intensities. Up next, I would say that this is more important than cardiovascular training, is manipulating the macros. So go ahead and take that right there, cutting macros, and bump it up above cardiovascular training. So cutting macros. When you cut macros, you leave protein and fiber alone. Leave them alone. When the carbs come down, you may see that fiber comes down as well, but for most part, you want to see fiber stay around the same. Protein, exact same. Some would make the argument that protein needs to go up over the course of a diet. I would agree with those people. And it definitely can't hurt. You cut from your carbohydrates and your fats. Which do you choose? You want to find what the individual prefers. I like a nice mixture of the two. As long as you're not taking it too low and cutting too extreme, you can't go wrong cutting a nice mixture of carbs and fat. So your breakfast used to be 4 whole eggs, 4 egg whites, and 3 slices of Ezekiel toast. Now we say, all right, it's 3 eggs, 6 egg whites, and we're down to 2 slices of the Ezekiel toast. So we've cut some fats as well as cutting some carbohydrates. What have we effectively done? We've reduced the energy content of your breakfast and of your total 24-hour period. So we should see a compensatory weight loss, fat loss. Small cuts are huge. Small cuts are huge. Talking about 50, if you can get away with 50, do it. 100, maybe up to 150 calories cut at any given time. Give it some time as well. I like to cut macros on 2-week to 3-week intervals. If we see perfect adherence, so if we see someone actually following the diet, sticking to it, and their weight isn't budging, then we know, or their weight's not budging for 3 weeks, then we know the macros are too high. We need to cut those calories down a little bit. But let's cut the minimum effective amount. So how few can we cut to get the best result? The final step that you can do here is you can actually increase physical activity. Now, I will always make the argument that increasing physical activity actually turns it into exercise by telling someone you have to get 10,000 steps a day. That turns it into exercise because it adds structure to it, but maybe I'm just being a semantic a-hole here, a pedantic a-hole here when I talk about this. But this is a variable that you can manipulate. So sometimes when you go in and the calories are already very, very low, the step count is at 8,000, you're like, man, we're already doing a good amount of cardio. The food is pretty low. My client has been talking about how they're having symptoms. They're very, very hungry all the time. Let's just manipulate the physical activity instead. So Anthony, your question was, what variables should we manipulate? Should manipulate all of them at the right time and in the right dosage. Guys, I hope this helped you out. I hope this gave you kind of an insight into how you're going to lay out your own fat loss diet if that's your goal, or if you're a coach, maybe this gave you some insight into how you can do things moving forward to get your clients better results. Go ahead and leave me comments below, some questions that you had. Maybe I said something that you were like, I don't know if that's really true, or I need some clarity there. Let me know in the comments below. As always, drop me a like. Or drop us a like. A subscription would be great. Make sure you go ahead and check out the website, giftedperformance.com. We've got 15 training programs for you guys to try out over there. It calculates your macros. It lets you track your weight. It lets you track your macros daily. It's got a meal planning feature. It really is an all-in-one automated coaching experience. You can also, if you're looking for that one-on-one touch, apply to work with one of our 5 great coaches. Guys, thank you again for watching. Let me know what you want to see next. But for now, I'm out. See ya.